They told me I was chasing ghosts. My editor laughed when I showed him the faded birth certificate. Thomas, he said, you're wasting your time on royal fairy tales. But I've been a journalist for 23 years, and I know the difference between a fairy tale and a cover-up. This was a cover-up, a massive, century-old cover-up that reached into the highest levels of the British monarchy. It started 3 months ago in a dusty archive room in Edinburgh. I was there researching a completely different story, something boring about Victorian-era trade agreements. But then I found it. A single page, yellowed with age, tucked between two ledgers that had nothing to do with each other. A birth registration from 1864. Mother's name, Victoria Adelaide Mary Louisa, Princess Royal of the United Kingdom. Father's name, Prince Frederick William of Prussia. Child's name, Wilhelm Frederick Albert. Wait, you're thinking, I know that name. Crown Prince Wilhelm, the future Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, the man who would lead his nation into World War I. But here's where it gets strange. The date on this certificate was wrong, completely wrong. According to every history book, every official record, Wilhelm was born on January 27, 1859. This certificate said December 12, 1864. 5 years later, a different child entirely. I sat in that archive room for 6 hours, my hands trembling as I photographed every angle of that document. The ink was real, the paper was authentic, the seal looked genuine, but it couldn't be real, could it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Princess Victoria, Queen Victoria's eldest daughter, the one they called Vicky. She married Frederick of Prussia in 1858 and moved to Berlin. History tells us she had 8 children, 8 documented, celebrated, photographed children. So who was this Wilhelm Frederick Albert born in 1864? I started digging, and the more I dug, the stranger it became. The official records showed that Princess Vicky had her 4th child, Prince Sigismund, in September 1864. He died less than 2 years later from meningitis. Tragic, but well documented. Except now I had a birth certificate for a different child born just 3 months after Sigismund, a child who shared the name with her firstborn son, a child who apparently never existed. I reached out to my contact at the Royal Archives in Windsor, Dr. Margaret Ashworth. We'd worked together before on a story about Queen Victoria's personal correspondence. She owed me a favor. "Margaret, I need you to look something up for me," I said over the phone. "December 1864, Princess Victoria of Prussia. Any unusual activity? Any gaps in the correspondence?" There was a long pause. "Thomas, why are you asking about that?" "Just humor me." Another pause. "There is something odd. Queen Victoria's letters to her daughter stop abruptly in November 1864 and don't resume until March 1865. 4 months of silence. That's unusual. They wrote to each other constantly." My heart started pounding. What about Vicky's letters? Did she write to anyone during that time? "Let me check." I heard papers rustling. No, nothing. It's like she vanished for 4 months. 4 months, exactly the right amount of time for a pregnancy to be hidden, a birth to occur, and a recovery to happen in secret. "Margaret, I need to see everything you have from that period. Medical records, household accounts, anything. Thomas, you know I can't just... Please, this is important." She sighed. "Come to Windsor tomorrow, early, and don't tell anyone." The drive to Windsor felt like it took forever. I kept thinking about what this meant. If Princess Vicky had a secret child in 1864, a child the royal family erased from history, why? What happened to that baby? And more importantly, why did they give him the same name as her firstborn son? Dr. Ashworth met me at a side entrance before the castle opened to tourists. She looked nervous. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, leading me through a maze of corridors. "If anyone finds out, they won't, I promise." She unlocked a door to a small reading room and placed a box on the table.
This is everything I could find from late 1864 to early 1865. Household accounts, medical expenses, correspondence from other family members. But Thomas, I need you to understand something. Whatever you find in here, you need to be very careful about how you use it. I opened the box. Inside were dozens of documents, most in German or French. My German is rusty, but I can manage. I started with the household accounts. November 1864. Standard expenses: food, coal, servants' wages. December 1864. Everything changes. There's a massive payment to a Dr. Edward Martin, £500. In 1864, that was a fortune. The notation said, private medical consultation and continued discretion. Continued discretion. My hands were trembling. January 1865, another payment to Dr. Martin, £300, plus expenses for special dietary requirements and private nursing staff. February 1865, a payment to Sister Agnes Holbrook, £200. The notation, for services rendered and eternal silence. Eternal silence. I looked up at Margaret. Did you see this? She nodded slowly. I saw it, but Thomas, seeing expenses and proving what they were for are two different things. She was right, but I had more. I dug deeper into the box and found a letter, not from Vicky or Queen Victoria, but from Prince Albert of Prussia, Vicky's father-in-law. It was written in German to an unnamed recipient. I translated as I read. The matter has been resolved with maximum discretion. The child has been placed with a suitable family far from Berlin. The princess is recovering well, though the emotional toll has been considerable. We trust this arrangement serves the interests of all parties, and that the unfortunate circumstances leading to this necessity will never come to light.
The child has been placed with a suitable family. I sat back in my chair. They gave the baby away. Princess Vicky, daughter of Queen Victoria, Crown Princess of Prussia, had a secret child and gave it away. But why? I spent the next 2 weeks following every lead I could find. I tracked down descendants of Dr. Edward Martin. I searched through adoption records from 1865. I even hired a genealogist in Berlin to help me piece together the puzzle. The genealogist, Klaus Weber, called me on a Tuesday evening. Thomas, I think I found something. There was a couple in Hamburg, Werner and Greta Fischer. In January 1865, they suddenly adopted a baby boy. They named him Wilhelm. My breath caught. Tell me more. Werner Fischer was a merchant, wealthy but not aristocratic. But here's the interesting part. In 1864, he received a contract to supply textiles to the Prussian royal household, a very lucrative contract. And then, just a few months later, he and his wife adopt this baby boy out of nowhere. They were in their 40s. They already had 3 grown children. Why would they suddenly adopt an infant? Because someone paid them to, I said. Exactly. And Thomas, there's more. I found Wilhelm Fischer's death certificate. He died in 1932 in Munich. Cause of death? Pneumonia. But before he died, he told his daughter something. She kept a diary. It's in the Munich State Archives. What did he tell her? He said he wasn't really a Fischer. He said his mother was a princess, but she couldn't keep him. He said he'd always known, but he'd promised never to tell anyone while his adoptive parents were alive. I was on the next flight to Munich. The diary was everything Klaus said it would be. Liesl Fischer wrote in meticulous detail about her father's final days. She described how he'd grown up always feeling different, always sensing that the Fischers weren't his real family. And then, in 1931, after Werner and Greta had both passed away, Wilhelm received a letter. Liesl had copied the letter into her diary. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding harder each time. Dear Wilhelm, you do not know me, but I have watched over you from afar for your entire life. I am writing to you now because I am old, and I cannot carry this burden to my grave.
You were born on December 12th, 1864, in Berlin. Your mother was Princess Victoria of Prussia. Your father was not Prince Frederick. That is why you could never be acknowledged. The scandal would have destroyed the monarchy. Please understand that your mother loved you. She wanted to keep you, but the decision was made at the highest levels. Queen Victoria herself ordered it. I was the midwife who delivered you. I was paid to keep silent, but I cannot die with this on my conscience. May God forgive us all. Sister Agnes Holbrook. I stood in the Munich archive reading those words over and over. Princess Vicky had an affair, she got pregnant, and Queen Victoria, the moral pillar of the British Empire, forced her daughter to give away the illegitimate child to protect the crown. But there was still one piece missing. Who was the father? I went back through every document, every letter, every piece of evidence I'd collected, and then I found it. A small notation in a court diary from 1864. In October of that year, Count Alexander von Schleinitz, a handsome, charming member of the Prussian court, was suddenly transferred to a diplomatic post in Constantinople, far away from Berlin. The notation said the transfer was at the urgent request of the crown princess. I researched von Schleinitz. 42 years old in 1864, married but unhappily, known for his affairs, and he'd been part of Princess Vicky's inner circle for years. Her husband, Prince Frederick, was often away on military duties. Vicky was lonely, isolated in a foreign court, struggling with the rigid Prussian aristocracy. It wasn't hard to imagine what happened. An affair, a pregnancy, panic, and then Queen Victoria swooping in to clean up the mess. But here's where the story gets even darker. Remember that first child, Kaiser Wilhelm II, born in 1959? History tells us he was a difficult birth. The baby was breech, and the doctors used forceps that damaged his arm, leaving it permanently withered. Wilhelm grew up bitter, insecure, desperate to prove himself. Many historians believe his psychological issues contributed to his aggressive foreign policy and Germany's path to World War I. But what if that traumatic birth wasn't just bad luck? What if the doctors were rough with Vicky during Wilhelm's delivery because they suspected or knew that her marriage to Frederick was already troubled? What if they were punishing her? And then, 5 years later, when she got pregnant again by another man, Queen Victoria made sure there would be no scandal. The baby had to disappear completely. I flew back to London and met with my editor. I laid out everything I'd found: the birth certificate, the household accounts, Sister Agnes's letter, Wilhelm Fischer's story. My editor listened quietly, then leaned back in his chair. Thomas, this is incredible work, but you know what's going to happen when you publish this. The palace will deny everything. More than that, they'll destroy you. They'll call it fake news. They'll discredit every source. They'll make you look like a conspiracy theorist. I know. So why do it?
I thought about Wilhelm Fischer, about a man who died never truly knowing who he was, about Princess Vicky, forced to give away her own child, about the lies and secrets that powerful families bury to protect themselves. Because it's the truth, I said. My editor nodded. Then let's tell it. But Thomas, we need more. We need DNA evidence. He was right. Everything I had was circumstantial. Compelling, but circumstantial. I needed scientific proof. Finding Wilhelm Fischer's descendants wasn't easy. He'd had only one daughter, Liesel, who had 2 children of her own before she died in 1978. I tracked down her son, Hans, now 84 years old, living in a nursing home in Stuttgart. When I explained who I was and why I was there, Hans stared at me for a long moment. Then he started to cry. "I always wondered," he said. "My mother told me stories about my grandfather, about how he never felt like he belonged, but I never knew if it was true." "Would you be willing to do a DNA test?" I asked.
I can compare your DNA to confirmed descendants of Queen Victoria. If your grandfather really was Vicky's son, it will show up." Hans nodded. "Yes, I need to know. My whole life I've wondered who I really am." The DNA test took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of barely sleeping, constantly checking my phone, driving my wife crazy with my obsessive pacing. And then the email came. I opened it with shaking hands. The geneticist had compared Hans's DNA to samples from known descendants of Queen Victoria. There are several who've participated in genetic genealogy projects over the years. The results were conclusive. Hans shared 12.5% of his DNA with Queen Victoria's descendants, exactly what you'd expect from a great-great-grandson. But the match pattern showed he descended through Princess Vicky's line, not through any of her acknowledged children. Hans was the great-grandson of a secret royal baby, a baby the monarchy erased from history. I sat in my office, staring at the genetic report, and felt a wave of emotions I couldn't quite name. Triumph, sadness, anger at the lies, pity for everyone involved. Princess Vicky died in 1901, 6 months after her mother, Queen Victoria. She'd lived her whole life with this secret. Her acknowledged son, Kaiser Wilhelm II, led Germany into a war that killed millions, and somewhere in Hamburg, then Munich, an unknown brother lived an ordinary life, never knowing that royal blood flowed through his veins. I published the story last week. As my editor predicted, the palace issued a statement calling it unfounded speculation based on questionable evidence. Some historians came to my defense. Others called me reckless. Social media exploded with debate. But Hans called me yesterday. He'd read the article. "Thank you," he said. "My grandfather spent his whole life wondering who he was. Now, at least, I know. Now his story is real." That's why I do this job. Not for the palace's approval, not for the controversy, but for people like Hans, for the truth. Because history isn't just about the people in the official photographs and the names in the genealogy books. It's about the secrets buried in dusty archives, the babies given away in the night, the women forced to choose between their children and their crowns. It's about the royal baby that never existed, except he did. Wilhelm Friedrich Albert Fischer, born December 12, 1864, died 1932, son of a princess, hidden by a queen, forgotten by history. Until now.